All right, guys, we are in part 2 now. This video may be a little longer, but let's move on here. Let's get into one of the secrets that I'm after when it comes to soybeans. One of the reasons I'm mixing it the way I am. All you have to do is go look at Eagle Seeds website, and they do tissue test comparisons on their own products, so you can see part of that, and I will provide the link for it and pictures to show you. If you was to look for their best soybean, they would recommend automatically Big Fellow. So I have Big Fellow in the plot, and in the center is Big Fellow in mass planting, and up here is a mix of Large Lad, Big Fellow, and Whitetail Thicket, and then Multi-Max there. The main portion of my plot, which is this big strip to the corner, and all that down there is a pure mix blend of soybean. So there's everything from real world, Large Lad, Big Fellow, Whitetail Thicket. There's at least 2 or 3 vining soybeans in it. So each one of these has a package of nutrients, and it's obvious in the tissue test. Large Lad is number 2 on their tissue test. But if you scroll down the list, when you get to those trace minerals, Large Lad, now it's better at several categories than Big Fellow, but it's better at zinc. I think Big Fellow was rated at 41 parts per million, and Large Lad is rated at 61 or 63 parts per million. That's a pretty good jump compared, to their quote top nutritious soybean. So in that department, Large Lad wins the nutrition war. So how do I balance out the pros and the cons of each soybean? The simple solution for me is to buy them all. I buy as many species as I can afford to put in my food plot. And I get the benefits of Large Lad, I get the benefits of Big Fellow, I also get the benefits of this new Multi-Max. And I do want to point out that my test strips are already revealing something is different with the Multi-Max. The browse pressure is more than twice as much than the other 2 rows. So there is something in this Multi-Max that the deer are after a little harder than these other type of soybean plants. And you need to really pay attention to that, because then you can go do tissue test on these and find out yourself what your ground is giving the deer, what nutrient in there is better than the others, and that's probably why they're going after it. So there's a lot of detail that can go into research for deer if you want to work that hard for it. Now, some other benefits that go on in here, and by the way, it's the first time I've ever said the reason why I have planted multiple soybeans or multiple species like that. So there's I think, in my theory, a really cool tip to try to squeeze a little more out of your deer. I mean, zinc alone, I'll jump into this too before I move on. It's very important. Zinc has to do with, a lot of this is reproduction. There are other health benefits beside that, but zinc actually raises sperm count in men, and it raises sperm count in deer. So now you have bucks with more sperm breeding more does, and that means the chances of success for your doe to be pregnant goes up, but also the ratio of single to twins increases toward the twin side, because there is more sperm there for a chance to fertilize another egg. And I believe that's why that one study or multiple studies have revealed does have twins more often under soybean conditions than they do in non-soybean conditions. So you're also helping your doe because it produces, this leads into the next phase of it produces a hormone that mimics estrogen. Estrogen works both ways for your deer. Even though you think estrogen for a buck may be bad, it is not. Estrogen for a buck makes him calmer. He's more docile. He is basically more relaxed. That makes a buck's antlers grow larger. Stress levels on a buck greatly affect antler size. So if you come in here, you got the best food plot in the world, and you're peeking out on everything you can give a deer. If stress overrides a lot of that, you will still never see full potential. And these soybeans help break the stress cycle in a buck by making them calmer. So therefore, hey, you start seeing 150s, 160s, 170s. Of course, a lot of that is nutrition, but when you combine it with stress reduction, it looks even nicer in person, I can tell you that. Now, some other things that can happen here is the species that I'm offering to the deer have another special hidden package amongst them. And that is this stuff right here, and this first big row of soybean you see growing right here. That whitetail thicket, the vining soybean, grows extremely large. Vine rates on good soil can get as high as 10 feet. So you would have a lot more soybean on. I mean, you're 3 feet taller than their tallest stalk growing soybean. The average vining soybean also produces twice as many pods as all these other brands that they have in here. That is another big bonus to me when it comes to my winter feeding program. So a soybean plant is considered a workhorse plant that I've mentioned a year or two ago. The duration at which this feeds my deer on average is about 9 months at the most. A little bit less, a little bit more, depending on how the crop year turns out. And this year is looking to be a stellar year so far. Even with extremely hot temperatures, this stuff is still growing at a very nice pace. So here I've got, I'll just show you the drought tolerance and heat tolerance this plant has. Look at that buckwheat plant. See how that's wilted? Do you see any wilt in those soybeans? I don't think so. They're still growing strong. These are very adaptable to summer conditions where other plants may falter. So let's move on here to the next benefit. And that benefit is the nitrogen it puts back in your soil. Actually, wait a minute. Before I move on, I don't want to skip ahead of this. Soybean, when I'm talking about the 9 months on average, that is the day that this comes up. The deer eat the leaves, that starts the clock. And then when the last bit of the pods are done, the clock is stopped. Now, because this is where the seesaw battle goes back and forth on the size of your plots. Because I have a smaller plot, I don't have a 10-acre bean field, I have a limited number of pods that I can provide the deer. So no matter how much space or how much material I can cram into this smaller plot, at some point the size of this plot will be my limitation. However, the limitation that I don't have is also the size of this plot. I know that sounds confusing, but it's only because this plot can handle the browse pressure. Therefore, the size of my food plot is adequate for my herd. But when it comes to consuming pods, the pods are limited. You only have so many, and it doesn't keep reproducing new pods like it does leaves. So once the pods are up, the leaves are falling off, you're toast. That's it. That's what you're running with for the winter. So that's the only limitation where size plays a role in my food plot. Now, some other highly important things here. Soybeans produce sugar in the leaves, and it also produces an oil in the pods. So as the pods develop, the beans start growing. There is a lot of carbs being produced. There is oil in those carbs. There's also some sugar content that goes with the pods. So everything that's in the leaves at some point will filter into the pods, and that's why these plants die. They basically starve themselves of nutrients in order to give the following generation a chance to grow. if that was, if that wasn't the case, soybean would probably be a totally different plant, way different plant if that wasn't the case. So now that you've got that, you've got all these pods, you have a single, a pod of soybeans contains 3 or 4 beans in it. It will have up to as much as 40% protein in those bean pods. Now, not guaranteed 40, up to 40. Your ground determines where that mark will land. You're going to give your deer high protein while it's growing and high protein when it's not growing. And that's when my 8 or 9 months runs out. The plants that are left behind, which is still high quality food, is not quite as good as what the bean pods will offer. It's better than chestnuts. It's better than oaks. I mean, the grain in those is completely off the charts compared to corn, nuts, or whatever. So be very mindful of that. That's why I do not plant cornfields anymore. Corn is a very low nutritious plant, and that's where soybean has a major pro in its favor when it comes to grain time. I think I've pretty much covered a lot of this now. Nothing really hit me off the top of my head, so I'm going to end this video, and whatever I miss I will add to this post. So y'all have a great day.